Have you ever had one of those moments? A single, tiny event that just sends your entire day into a catastrophic spiral. For a young man named Ayan, that moment came at exactly 6:10 a.m. He'd just missed his bus. As he stood there, gasping for breath, watching the taillights vanish into traffic, he felt this crushing weight settle over him. He thought his day was over. He had no idea. It was just beginning. This is a story about how our most frustrating moments are sometimes just life, pointing us in a whole new direction. It's about a man who got pushed back only to be launched forward.
6:09 and 30 seconds. His world was just fragments. The harsh slap of his running shoes on the pavement, the fire in his lungs, screaming for more air than the morning had to offer. The clumsy jostle of his shoulder bag, its contents jabbing his side. 45 seconds. The street corner, once so far away, was now agonizingly close. He could see it. The big blue and white frame of the 6:10 a.m. express, its lights a beacon of both hope and doom. 55 seconds. The hydraulic hiss of the brakes was the sound of a closing door. He saw it begin to shut. A final, desperate surge of adrenaline shot him forward, his hand outstretched in a silent plea. But it was too late. The doors sealed with a soft, indifferent puff. With a low groan, the bus pulled away, taking every last shred of his hope with it. To understand just how big a deal that missed bus was, you have to understand the world Ayan was desperately trying to catch up to. His life, to put it mildly, was painted in shades of gray. Every morning, Monday to Friday, he'd wake up before the sun with a quiet sense of dread. That bus wasn't some chariot carrying him to his dreams. It was a shuttle, taking him from his quiet, dissatisfying apartment to his loud, fluorescent-lit personal purgatory. He was a data entry clerk for a huge, faceless corporation. His kingdom was a small, beige cubicle in a sea of identical boxes. His throne was a worn-out ergonomic chair that had given up on being ergonomic years ago. He spent 8 hours a day, every day, moving numbers from one spreadsheet to another. He was a cog in a giant machine, and he knew it, a tiny, replaceable part. But it wasn't always supposed to be this way. Tucked away under his bed, collecting dust, was a stack of old sketchbooks. They weren't filled with numbers. They were filled with lines, curves, and angles. They were the ghosts of a different Ayan, a younger guy who dreamed in blueprints and saw poetry in skylines. He was passionate about architecture. He didn't just want to build buildings, he wanted to create spaces that felt alive, spaces that could make people feel something. That dream now felt like a memory from someone else's life. The realities of rent, bills, and that gnawing fear of instability had slowly choked him out. The sketchbooks were closed, the pencils put away. The dream was filed under unrealistic. His job, the one he was now late for, was the anchor keeping him from financial ruin, but it was also the anchor pinning him to the bottom of the ocean. So, when he stood on that corner, watching the 6:10 bus disappear, it wasn't just about being late. It was a gut-punch confirmation of every negative thought he had about himself. It felt like a symbol for his entire life. Always running, always chasing, and always, in the end, arriving just a second too late. The missed bus felt like a verdict, and the sentence was failure. The first thing he felt was just hot, white anger. A scream of frustration got stuck in his throat. His fists clenched so tight, his knuckles turned white. He kicked the bus stop sign, a totally futile act that just sent a painful jolt up his leg and did nothing to calm the storm inside him. Then, just as quickly as it came, The anger vanished, leaving behind a cold, heavy fog of despair. The downward spiral began. It was a familiar feeling, one negative thought calling to all its friends. Of course I missed it. Why would today be any different? Then the other thoughts piled on. I can't even do this one simple thing right. Just get to the bus on time. A child could do it. He pictured how it would play out. The groveling email to his supervisor, full of weak excuses. He could already feel the sting of his boss's short, condescending reply. He imagined walking into the office an hour late, feeling all the judgmental eyes on him. The docked pay was a practical problem, but it was the shame that felt the most expensive. He could just wait for the next bus, the 6:40 a.m. local, the slow one, the one that stopped at every corner and was always packed with a miserable-looking crowd. But the thought of it was crushing. It felt like giving in, like getting back in line for another dose of mediocrity. No. He turned away from the bus stop and just started walking, with no destination in mind. It was a walk of surrender. The city, usually just a blur on his commute, came into sharp, painful focus. The roar of traffic was the sound of the world moving on without him. He felt totally, crushingly alone. His aimless wandering led him down quieter side streets until he found himself at the gates of a small city park he'd passed 1,000 times but never actually entered. Today, its silence was calling to him. He walked in and found an empty bench, far from the entrance, and just collapsed onto it. He buried his face in his hands. The day was ruined. His life was ruined. And it all started with one missed bus. He sat there for what felt like forever, just stewing in his own misery. The only sound that broke through was the gentle cooing of pigeons. Finally, he let out a long, shuddering sigh, a sound that carried the full weight of his frustration. That's a heavy sigh for such a bright morning. The voice was calm and steady. Ion lifted his head, startled. On the next bench over sat an old man. He didn't look magical or anything. He just looked like he belonged there, under the big oak tree. He had kind eyes and held a small, worn sketchbook. Feeling a little exposed, Ion got defensive. "Sorry, am I bothering you?" The old man just smiled. "Not at all, but a sigh like that carries a story. It sounded like you're carrying something a lot heavier than that bag." Something about the man's genuine tone disarmed Ion, and the words just came tumbling out. "I missed my bus. My whole day is ruined. I'm going to be late. My boss is going to be mad. It's just a disaster," he finished, feeling kind of stupid for unloading on a total stranger. The old man just listened patiently. He didn't say, "Don't worry," or "It'll be okay." Instead, he just tilted his head and asked a simple question that cut through all of Ion's noise. "Ruined?" he asked softly. "Or just redirected?" Ion stared, confused. "What's the difference? I didn't get where I needed to go." "Ah," the old man said, a knowing look in his eyes. "But that assumes you were headed in the right direction in the first place." He paused. "Have you ever watched an archer?" The question was so random, it caught Ion off guard. "An archer? Not really. Why?" "Well," the old man began, "to make an arrow fly forward, to give it the power to hit a target hundreds of feet away, what's the very first thing the archer has to do?" Ion thought for a second. "He has to pull it back, I guess?" "Exactly," the old man nodded. "He has to pull it back. He draws the bowstring, creating all this tension. The arrow itself actually moves backward, further away from its target. From the arrow's point of view, it must feel like a total failure. It's going in the completely wrong direction. It feels the strain, the pressure, the backward motion. It must feel like it's losing." He leaned in a little, but the archer, who sees the bigger picture, knows the truth. That backward motion isn't a retreat. It's the gathering of potential. It's the source of all the power. The further back the arrow is drawn, the greater the tension, and the more powerful its flight will be when it's finally released. The old man let that sink in for a moment. You feel like you've been pulled back this morning. You missed your bus, you're here on this bench feeling defeated. You think you're moving away from your target. But what if this isn't a punishment? What if the universe isn't mad at you? What if it's just drawing the bow? What if all this tension you feel isn't a sign that you're failing, but it's just the prelude to your release? What if it's just aiming you? He added one last thought, his voice almost a whisper. The arrow can't see the target. It only feels the tension. It has to trust the archer. Maybe your job isn't to fight the pullback. Maybe it's to trust the aim, even when all you can feel is the strain.
And with that, the old man said nothing more. He gave Ayan another small, knowing smile, closed his sketchbook, got up, and walked away, leaving Ayan alone with an idea that was as terrifying as it was liberating. It's aiming you. The words echoed in the quiet park. It was like a key turning a lock he didn't even know was there. He looked at his situation through this new lens. A missed bus, a ruined day, a failure. He'd seen it as a dead end. The old man made him wonder, what if it was an off-ramp to somewhere better? A wave of something he hadn't felt in years washed over him. Clarity. That bus, that job he was late for, was that really his target? Or was it just the direction he'd been running out of habit and fear? He'd been fighting so hard to get to a place he didn't even want to be. For the first time, he realized the universe hadn't blocked his path, it had cleared it. A new question took root. If he wasn't meant to be on that bus, where was he meant to go? He stood up from the bench, feeling a new kind of energy. Not the frantic panic from his morning run, but a quiet, humming sense of purpose. He thought about those dusty sketchbooks under his bed. He thought about the boy who loved buildings. An image popped into his head. The city's central public library. It was this magnificent old building he'd always admired from the bus window, but had never once stepped inside. It was a few miles away, a long walk. But for the first time that day, he had a real destination. He walked with his shoulders back and his head up. When he finally pushed open the library's heavy bronze doors, it felt like crossing a threshold. The air inside was cool and smelled of old paper and limitless possibilities. He walked right past fiction and history and went straight for the shelves marked 720, Architecture. He ran his fingers along the spines of the books, the names, Wright, Gaudi, Hadid, sending a jolt through him. He pulled a heavy book from the shelf, sat down at a long oak table, and opened it. The day he thought was ruined was spent in absolute awe. He devoured book after book, his old passion roaring back to life like a starved fire finally getting oxygen. On a napkin from the library cafe, he started to sketch. A simple curve, then a bold line, then another. It was clumsy and hesitant, but it was there. His dream wasn't dead. It was just dormant, waiting for a moment of stillness. It had been waiting for a missed bus.
A year later, Ion still caught a bus every morning, but it wasn't going to the soul-crushing data entry job. He'd walked out of that library a different man. He didn't quit his job the next day. The pullback had taught him patience, but he had started a new journey. He enrolled in night classes for architectural design. His days were still spent in the gray cubicle, but now he saw it as the funding for his escape. The monotonous work became a kind of discipline, fueling his real passion at night. 5 years later, the cubicle was a distant memory. Ion stood on a muddy construction site with a hard hat on his head and a set of blueprints in his hand. The air buzzed with the sounds of creation. He was an architect, and he was overseeing the construction of a new community center, with a public library at its heart and a small, quiet park right next to it. A space designed for connection, for chance encounters, for people to find a moment of peace. He looked up at the steel skeleton of the building, the framework of his dream made real, and smiled. From the street, he heard the familiar hiss of a city bus. He watched the passengers get on and off, each on their own journey, each facing their own pullbacks. He thought back to that morning 5 years ago, to that crushing feeling of defeat on the street corner. The old man was right. He hadn't been pushed back. He had been aimed. Missing the bus wasn't the event that ruined his day. It was the event that made his life. The setback wasn't an obstacle on his path. It was the beginning of his true path. Sometimes, life slams a door in your face not to punish you, but to make you walk down a hallway you never knew existed. In a way, we're all a bit like Ion. We're all running to catch buses we're not even sure we want to be on. We dread those moments of delay, of failure, of being pulled back. But Ion's story is a reminder of the archer's wisdom. Life's biggest setbacks are often just life pulling us back, aiming us, and getting us ready for our greatest launch. The tension is temporary. The redirection is a gift. So, what missed bus in your life turned out to be a profound redirection? What moment of seeming failure was actually life aiming you toward a better target? If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments below. Share a time when a setback became a setup for something incredible. And for more stories to challenge your perspective, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who might just need to hear this message today. Trust the aim.
They say every kingdom has its ghosts. But what happens when a kingdom is made of them? A realm built from spectral subjects and broken memories, ruled by the last of a line of phantom royalty. She is the final heir, the keeper of a throne of echoes, and for centuries, her lonely existence has been the only constant in this land of shadows. But now, something's changed. A living man has stumbled into her domain, and she has to decide, is he a threat to her eternal reign, or the key to finally breaking its curse? For more centuries than anyone could count, Princess Alara was the sole warden of Silengard, the Shadow Kingdom. She wasn't living, but she wasn't truly dead either. She was an anchor, a fixed point in a silent, spectral sea. Her kingdom was a masterpiece of sorrow, its towers like skeletal fingers clawing at a sky of perpetual twilight. Sunlight never touched this place. It couldn't get past the shimmering, invisible barrier that separated her home from the world of the living, a world she only knew from the fractured memories of her own people. And her people were ghosts, but not the terrifying kind you hear about in campfire tales. No, they were echoes, trapped in the amber of their single, final moment. In the grand ballroom, phantom nobles still waltzed to a silent orchestra, their jeweled gowns passing right through one another like smoke. In the bailey, guardsmen stood at their posts, their spectral eyes fixed on a horizon no living enemy would ever cross. They were memories, just fraying and thinning a little more with each century that passed. Alara would walk among them, a more solid shade in a world of whispers. She was their queen, but she couldn't speak to them. She could only watch as they replayed their final day, completely unaware of their fate and totally unaware of her lonely vigil. Her life was a quiet loop. She'd trace patterns in the dust on the great hall's floor, a tapestry woven from forgotten years. She'd sit on her throne of obsidian in sorrow, the crown of echoes feeling impossibly heavy on her spectral brow, and pretend to hold court. She'd listen as phantom petitioners pleaded their long-dead cases, their mouths moving without a sound. This kingdom, with its broken memories and silent people, was her charge, her prison, her entire world. The curse that held them all was her birthright. And then he arrived. It happened without any warning, a tremor in the stillness, a sound that wasn't a memory, a light that wasn't the pale, cold glow of phantom energy. A man, breathing and bleeding, stumbled through the veil of the kingdom's border, a flickering torch held high in his hand. That light, so warm and alive, sent the ghosts scattering like startled moths. It was the first real light to touch the stones of Silengard in 1,000 years, and to Alara, it felt like a physical blow. He collapsed just inside the gate, a living, breathing sacrilege in her kingdom of the dead. For the first time in her long, long existence, Alara felt something other than sorrow. She felt fear. She drifted towards the intruder, her form much more solid than the dissipating ghosts around her. The man, Liam, was an explorer, an academic obsessed with the legend of a kingdom that vanished overnight. He'd spent years deciphering crumbling maps and half-forgotten folklore, all just to find the myth of Silengard. Now, with a gash on his forehead and his clothes torn, he'd found it. As he stirred, his eyes widened. He was looking right at her. She wasn't a wisp or a wraith, but a figure of pale, luminous substance, regal, ancient. He'd expected a monster. He did not expect a queen. "You don't belong here." Ilara's voice sounded like the chime of cracked crystal. It had been centuries since she'd last used it, and the sound startled even her. Liam, instead of running, just stared. "It's real," he breathed, his words turning to a puff of white mist in the cold air. "The legends are true." He tried to get up, wincing as he put weight on an injured leg. "I'm Liam, a historian. I didn't mean any harm. The barrier, it tore at me when I came through." Ilara's suspicion fought with a desperate, unfamiliar curiosity. He was a threat, a disruption. His living energy was a wrong note in the silent symphony of her world. And yet, he looked at her crumbling kingdom not with fear, but with reverence. "This is a realm of the dead," she said, her voice a little stronger this time. "A place of final rest. Your presence here is a desecration." "A final rest?" Liam challenged, gesturing to the ghostly figures that were starting to reform at the edges of his torchlight. "They aren't resting, Your Highness. They're trapped, just like you." His words hit a truth she had ignored for far too long. Over the next few days, an uneasy truce formed between them. Liam, with his endless curiosity and his knowledge of the world outside, started to piece together the history of the curse, a curse Ilara had only ever known as a fact of her existence. He studied the crumbling frescoes in the royal chapel and the faded script in the library's spectral tomes, books whose pages she could never turn. He discovered the curse wasn't an enemy's attack at all. It was a desperate act of preservation. Ilara's ancestor, the last living king, had cast a massive spell to save his people from something called the Ashen Plague, a magical pestilence that consumed all life. The spell was supposed to place them in a timeless stasis until the plague passed, but something went horribly wrong. It fractured, turning the kingdom into a spectral echo and tethering the royal line to it to act as its warden. The kingdom wasn't just frozen, it was decaying. The broken memories were the spell itself unraveling, the ghosts slowly fading into nothing. "The curse isn't a lock," Liam explained one evening, standing before a vast celestial map carved into the observatory floor. "It's a failing dam, and when it breaks, your people won't just pass on. They'll be obliterated, erased, as if they never existed." The real threat wasn't Liam, it was time. As he spoke, a tremor ran through the castle, stronger than any before. A ghostly courtier in the hall below flickered violently, and then just vanished. Her loop of memory finally broken. The nothingness was coming for them. Liam was convinced the source of the spell, its heart, was in the catacombs beneath the castle. He recognized symbols from his research that described a heartstone, a magical focus that powered the whole thing. He argued that if they could find it, he might be able to use what he knew about ancient magic to stabilize it. But Ilara knew the catacombs were the most dangerous part of her kingdom. It was where the memories were most broken, where the oldest, most confused spirits dwelled, and where the decaying magic was at its most hostile. To go there was to risk being torn apart by the very thing holding her world together.
The journey down into the catacombs was like a journey through madness. Here, the memories weren't peaceful loops, they were chaotic, violent fragments. Spectral soldiers fought phantom battles, their silent screams echoing in the soul. The air grew thick with a real, palpable despair, the raw agony of a kingdom dying. The failing magic lashed out at them like a cornered animal. Liam's torch was their only shield. Its living flame was the only thing pushing back the chaos. They finally reached the heart of the catacombs, a vast cavern where a heartstone pulsed with a sickening black light. It wasn't a beacon of preservation anymore. It was a vortex of decay, a tiny black hole eating the spectral energy of the kingdom. The ghosts weren't just fading, they were being devoured. Around the stone, twisted, half-formed spirits writhed, their forms distorted by its corrupt magic. "It's worse than I thought," Liam breathed, his face pale. "The magic has turned malignant. It's feeding on them." He explained that trying to repair it now would be like trying to patch a volcano. Any new magic would probably just cause it to shatter, taking everything with it. There was only one other choice: destroy it. "If we destroy it," Ilara asked, her voice trembling, "what happens to them?" "They'll be released," Liam said softly. "The spell will break. They'll be free to pass on the way they should have 1,000 years ago. And the kingdom," she whispered, "it will be gone. The ruins will still be here, but the Shadow Kingdom will end. And she would be left behind, mortal and completely alone. For a millennium, her entire purpose had been to preserve her people. Now she understood that true leadership, true love, meant letting them go. Her reign was never a duty. It was a cage she had mistaken for a throne. "Do it," she said, her voice filled with a resolve she hadn't felt in centuries. The corrupted Heartstone fought back. As Liam began a counter-ritual from a text he'd memorized, the twisted spirits swarmed them. Ilara, for the first time, used her power not as a warden, but as a queen. She stood in front of Liam, her spectral form blazing with 1,000 years of collected sorrow and love. She was the anchor, and she would not be moved. She held the screaming phantoms at bay, her will alone forming a shield, buying Liam the precious moments he needed. He slammed his palm, glowing with an inscribed rune, onto the Heartstone. The result wasn't an explosion. It was an implosion of silence. A wave of pure white light erupted from the stone, washing through the catacombs, up through the castle, and across the entire kingdom. As the light touched each ghost, their forms solidified for one perfect moment. The waltzing nobles paused, the guardsmen turned from their posts, and for the first time, they all looked towards their queen. They smiled, and 1,000 silent voices whispered a single word in her soul: "Thank you." Then they dissolved into motes of gentle light, ascending and fading into the twilight sky. The crown of echoes evaporated from Alara's head. The stones of the castle groaned as the magic holding them in stasis finally let go. The spectral barrier around the kingdom shattered, and for the first time, Alara felt the wind of the living world on her cheek. The sun, just beginning to rise over the distant mountains, cast a golden spear of light into the valley. It lit up the ancient, crumbling ruins of what was once Silengard. She stood among the stones of her fallen kingdom, no longer a phantom, no longer a queen. She felt the chill of the morning air and the solid ground beneath her. She was mortal. She was alone. But, standing right beside her, his torch now extinguished in the growing light of dawn, was Liam. Her past was gone. Her future was a blank page. But, for the first time in 1,000 years, it was hers to write.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the Shadow Kingdom. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing for more tales from the realms of fantasy and mystery. Let us know in the comments what you think Alara's future holds, and be sure to check out the description for links to support our channel and our authors. The story of the last heir is over, but the world is now wider and more mysterious than it was before. What other forgotten kingdoms lie sleeping, just waiting for a single living soul to stumble upon their secrets? What curses are really just long-forgotten acts of love? Perhaps some shadows aren't meant to be feared.
Don't ever let your pride win. Don't ever let someone dare you to do something when your gut is screaming at you to run. They dared me to swim in the moonlit river, and now I can't get the whispers out of my head. I have to tell someone what happened before I become its next ghost.
My name is Leo, and up until 3 months ago, I was a man of logic. I dealt in facts, in evidence, things I could see and touch. Ghosts, curses, ancient secrets, that was all just noise. Quaint stories you tell around a campfire to spook teenagers. I grew up in Oak Haven, a small town stitched together by logging history and local folklore. And right at the heart of that folklore was the river. Everyone called it the Moonlit River. The name came from the strange way the water seemed to swallow the light, leaving just a slick silver path on the surface, even on the brightest nights. But the old-timers had another name for it, one they only whispered: the Ghost River. They said it was a place of passage, a boundary between our world and, well, somewhere else. They claimed it held the souls of those who got lost along the way, their whispers caught in the current as a warning. My grandfather used to say the river demanded a toll, though he'd never say what. I always laughed it off. It was just a river. A cold, deep, fast-moving river, sure, but a river nonetheless. After a decade away for college and a city job where the only folklore was about traffic patterns, I moved back. The quiet was a relief. I fell right back in with my 2 best friends from high school, Liam and Maya. They'd stayed, settling into the easy rhythm of small-town life. It seemed they'd also absorbed all the local superstitions I was so proud of leaving behind. The night it all happened started like any other late summer evening. We were down by the riverbank, a crackling bonfire pushing back the dark. Liam, who always loved a good story, started retelling the legend of the Ghost River. He went on about people vanishing near its banks, the sounds of wailing on moonless nights, and the old saying that the river never gives up its dead. "It's a thermal inversion," I said, poking the fire with a stick. "Cold water from the mountain springs meets the warmer air. It creates fog and weird acoustics. It's just science." Maya shivered and pulled her jacket tighter. "It's more than that, Leo. You can feel it. This place is sad." "It's a river," I scoffed, taking a long pull of my beer. "It's wet and it's cold. End of story." That's when Liam's eyes lit up with that foolish glint you only get from a mix of beer and hometown pride. "Is that right, Mr. Science? You that sure of yourself?" I shrugged. "Perfectly." He pointed his bottle across the dark water. On the other side, a massive, ancient sycamore stood alone, its pale branches looking like skeletal fingers in the gloom. "All right then, I dare you. Swim to the old sycamore and back. Prove it's just a river." I hesitated, but only for a second. Some primal, instinctual part of my brain screamed at me. It was a stupid, childish dare. The water was notoriously freezing. But then I saw the smug look on Liam's face and the worry on Maya. My pride, that arrogant, foolish part of me that thought it knew better, took over. The air was unnaturally still. The usual chorus of crickets and frogs was gone. The river looked like a strip of polished obsidian, reflecting the moon but holding none of its light. Every rational thought told me to laugh it off and go home. "Fine," I heard myself say. The word tasted like a mistake the second it left my lips. "It's just a swim." I stripped down to my shorts, and the night air instantly raised goosebumps on my skin. The silence from the woods felt heavy, like it was pressing in on me. As I waded in, the shock wasn't just the cold. It was the kind of cold. It wasn't the clean, crisp chill of mountain water. This was a dead, heavy cold that seemed to suck the warmth right out of my bones. The riverbed was a thick, sinking silt that grabbed at my feet. "See you in a few minutes," I called back, but my voice sounded thin and weak in the vast silence. Their shapes by the fire were my only anchor to the real world. I pushed off into the current. The water felt thick, almost oily, moving with a sluggish power that was deeply unnerving. And then I heard it. At first, it was just a sigh, something you could easily mistake for wind in the trees. But there was no wind. I stopped, treading water, the icy liquid licking at my chin. The sound was a whisper, too faint to be a word, but it was there. It felt like it was coming from beneath me, from the water itself. A collective, sorrowful breath. I remembered the legends, souls trapped in the current, whispering a warning. Just my imagination, I told myself, spurred on by campfire stories. I pushed the thought away and kept swimming. Halfway across, something brushed my leg. Not a fish, not a drifting log. It was a touch. It felt definite, like fingers trailing across my skin, leaving a path of absolute zero in their wake. I yelled out and kicked my legs wildly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I spun around in the water, but there was nothing, just the dark, impenetrable surface. It had to be a branch. It had to be. My bravado was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. This wasn't about winning a dare anymore. It was about getting out alive. I reached the far bank, my hand sinking into the damp, mossy earth as I scrambled out. I stood there gasping for breath, my body shaking uncontrollably. The ancient sycamore loomed over me, its roots twisted like gnarled knuckles digging into the mud. I slapped its trunk, the goal of the dare, and without a second's pause, threw myself back in the river. I just wanted it to be over. The swim back was a nightmare. The whispers were louder now, no longer just a formless sound. I could almost make out words, catching at the edge of my hearing. So cold. Can't remember. Help. They were hollow, desperate, the sound of souls who had forgotten themselves. The Greek myth of the river Lethe flashed through my mind, the river of forgetfulness. These weren't just whispers, they were pleas. Then the touch came again. This time, it wasn't a brush, it was a grip, something solid, impossibly strong, and colder than the water itself, locked around my ankle. It was a hand. I felt the distinct pressure of fingers and a thumb digging into my flesh. Pure animal panic surged through me. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound that the night just swallowed. I thrashed, kicking with my free leg, trying to break the hold. For one terrifying moment, it pulled me under into a chaotic, black, silent hell. Then, just as suddenly as it grabbed me, the hand was gone. I didn't swim the rest of the way. I clawed through the water in a blind panic, my lungs burning, until I hit the shallows and scrambled onto the bank, collapsing onto the gravel, gasping and sobbing. Liam and Maya were on me in a second, their laughter dying when they saw the terror on my face. "Leo, man, what happened? Are you okay?" Liam asked, helping me up. Something grabbed me," I choked out, pointing a shaking finger at the black water. They peered into the darkness. "There's nothing there, dude. We saw you thrashing, but you probably just got a cramp." They didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. I was the skeptic, the one who was supposed to prove them wrong. I looked down at my ankle, expecting bruises, marks, anything. There was nothing, just pale, cold skin. They thought I was being dramatic, but I knew what I had felt. The cold didn't leave me, even by the fire. It was a deep, internal chill that no blanket could touch. The real horror, though, began the next day. The haunting had followed me home. The whispers hadn't stayed at the river. I'd be washing dishes and hear them from the drain, a faint, gurgling plea for help. The hiss of my old radiator at night would twist into that same sorrowful word, forgotten. I started seeing things, a fleeting shadow in a doorway, a heat haze distortion in my ice-cold apartment. The worst part was the smell, a damp, cloying scent of river mud and decay that would fill a room and then vanish. My dreams were of dark, rushing water and the crushing pressure of being held down, whispers swirling all around me. My logical world was crumbling. I wasn't a skeptic anymore. I was a man being haunted.
Before I tell you what I found and what I had to do to make it all stop, I have to ask, have you ever experienced something you just can't explain? Something that shattered your reality? Let me know in the comments. It helps to know you're not alone. And if you want to hear more stories from the edge of our world, make sure you subscribe. Weeks bled into a haze of sleeplessness and fear. I was a wreck. I avoided my friends, called in sick to work. The confident, rational man who waded into that river was gone, replaced by a paranoid ghost of himself. I knew I had two choices: let this thing drive me insane or fight back. And fighting back meant understanding my enemy. My first stop was the Oak Haven Historical Society, a dusty room above the library run by a woman named Mrs. Gable. I told her I was researching old milling operations on the river, a believable lie. She was just happy to have a visitor and left me with archives that smelled of vanilla and decay. For days, I pored over brittle newspapers and faded maps. I found dozens of references to the river. Drownings and boating accidents, of course, but there was more. Mentions of people who just wandered off near the riverbank, never to be seen again. An article from 1888 called it the River of Sorrow. The breakthrough came from a crumbling journal written by one of the town's first ministers. He wrote about the river, describing it as a sentient and malevolent thing. And he told a story, the story of Silas Croft. Silas was one of the first settlers, a man who saw the river as a resource to be conquered. He built a grist mill, the town's first industry. But to power it, he dammed a tributary, changing the river's flow and, in the process, flooding a sacred burial site of the native tribe that lived there for centuries. The minister wrote that the river itself turned on Silas. A curse was laid. His wife and child were swept away in a flash flood that destroyed the dam. Consumed by grief and madness, Silas threw himself into the river. But he didn't just die. His soul became the river's first permanent resident, the oldest ghost. He became its ferryman, his curse to feel the sorrow of all the other souls the river claimed, his torment to drag others down with him, hoping one might take his place. He was the one holding them there, forcing them to drink the water of forgetfulness until they no longer knew who they were. The minister's last entry was a frantic, barely legible sprawl. He wrote that the only way to appease the old spirit of the river was to acknowledge its memory, to give something back, not an object, but a sacrifice, a memory for a memory. You had to pay the toll. Sitting in that dusty archive, I knew. The hand around my ankle, it was Silas. He had marked me, and I knew what I had to do. That night, I went back to the river. The thought of it was paralyzing, but living the rest of my life like this was worse. I stood on the same bank where I'd accepted the dare. The water was black and silent. My hands trembled. "Silas Croft," I said, my voice cracking. "I know your name. I know your story. You are not forgotten." I closed my eyes and searched for my most cherished memory. My grandmother on her last good day. We were sitting in her garden, the sun on our faces, and she was telling me a story from her childhood, her eyes clear and full of life. It was a memory I held like a precious gem. With tears streaming down my face, I spoke to the river. "I offer this memory. I give it to you. Let it be my toll. Release me." I focused on every detail, the scent of roses, the sound of her laugh, the warmth of her hand, and I let it go. I felt a sudden, violent wrench inside my head, a feeling of profound, instant loss. It was like a piece of my soul being torn away. I staggered back, dizzy, and then silence. The oppressive cold in the air lifted. The faint whispers in the back of my mind were gone. For the first time in weeks, I was alone. The haunting stopped. I could sleep. The damp smell never returned. My life went back to normal on the surface, but I'm not the same man. And there was a cost. Sometimes I'll try to picture my grandmother, and where that sunny day in the garden should be, there is just a blank space, a hollow ache for something I know I've lost, but can no longer remember. I paid the river's toll. I appeased its oldest ghost, but I left a piece of myself in that cold, dark water. The ghost river is quiet for me now, but it's still out there, waiting, and its collection of lost souls is one memory richer.
Have you ever met someone who thinks a small title gives them infinite power? You know, the kind of person who starts as a volunteer president of the HOA and ends up acting like the mayor of the world? Well, this story is about one of them. A man who ruled a quiet neighborhood like his own private kingdom, until one homeowner quietly decided to bring everything crashing down peacefully. I moved into Maple Creek Estates 2 summers ago. Beautiful lawns, quiet streets, smiling neighbors. The kind of place where everyone waves at each other and kids ride bikes till sunset. At least, that's what I thought, until I met Mr. Gerald Parker, the HOA president. He wasn't elected. He'd been serving since the neighborhood was built, and according to him, everything needed his approval. A new mailbox? Submit a request. Planting roses? Wait for next month's board meeting. And heaven forbid you painted your fence a shade darker. You'd get a letter by morning. At first, I thought he was just doing his job. But then, the letters started piling up. One neighbor got fined for having too many garden gnomes. Another was forced to cut down a 15-year-old tree because it blocked the view of the street sign. Every week, Gerald drove around in his golf cart, clipboard in hand, inspecting homes like a general reviewing troops. He even stopped by my driveway once to remind me that my garbage cans were an inch too far from the curb. The man was obsessed, and rumor had it he used HOA funds to improve his own property. New landscaping, repainting, even a private security system for the community. Nobody dared question him, because anyone who did suddenly found themselves fined for something absurd. That's when I realized this wasn't just strict management. It was control.
Then came the letter that changed everything. It was a $750 fine, unauthorized garden lights. The lights? They were solar, soft, and installed before I even moved in. I tried to appeal. Gerald refused to meet me. I emailed the HOA board, no response. That's when my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, quietly knocked on my door. She handed me a thick folder and whispered,
"You're not the only one. Keep this safe."
Inside were copies of financial reports, handwritten notes, and board meeting summaries. And one thing was clear. The HOA account was bleeding money. Thousands spent on maintenance projects that didn't exist. Invoices signed only by one person, Gerald. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at those papers, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt calm, because I knew exactly what I had to do.
Instead of confronting him, I started collecting evidence, quietly. Every receipt, every rule violation, every fake signature. Over 3 months, I built a file so detailed it could have been a detective's case. Then I filed a formal complaint to the county's Community Association Oversight Office with all the documents attached. And while that process took time, I also did something else. I started talking to my neighbors, calmly, respectfully. No gossip, no drama, just facts. I showed them the numbers, the fake expenses, the personal purchases, and one by one, the fear turned into unity. By the time the next HOA election came around, something magical happened. For the first time in a decade, someone else ran for president. Election day was like a movie scene. Gerald stood in front of the crowd, smiling like always, confident that nobody would dare challenge him. Then Mrs. Alvarez stepped up with a box full of copies, evidence for every homeowner. You could feel the silence turn into whispers, then murmurs, then outrage. He tried to deny it,
but the county officials were already there. Turns out my report had triggered an official audit. By sunset, Gerald wasn't president anymore. He was under investigation for embezzlement and misuse of community funds. The man who once fined people for gnomes now faced fines of his own, real ones. A few months later, Maple Creek Estates finally felt peaceful again. No more surprise letters, no more power trips, just neighbors planting flowers, chatting in driveways, living normally again. And that's when I realized something simple. Sometimes the calmest voice can bring down the loudest tyrant. You don't need to shout, threaten, or fight. You just need the truth and patience. So next time someone in power tries to act like they own you, remember this story. Because control built on fear never lasts. But truth always finds its way home.
Have you ever moved somewhere that felt too perfect to be real? Neat lawns, smiling neighbors, matching fences, like a painting that hides the cracks underneath. That's how it felt for Sarah Coleman when she moved into Willow Creek Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Texas. After years of saving, she'd finally bought her dream home, a place to start over, surrounded by peace. Or so she thought. The first letter arrived 2 weeks after she moved in. A yellow envelope tucked under her door, stamped with the bold logo of the HOA. Violation, fence color non-compliance, fine $250. Sarah blinked at it for a few seconds, confused. Her fence was the same color as every other house on her street, including the HOA president's. She sent a polite email asking for clarification. No response. Then came another envelope. Late payment, $50 additional fine. At her first HOA meeting, she brought photos of her fence as proof. But before she could finish speaking, the president, Mr. Adams, interrupted. "We'll review it later, Miss Coleman. Next item." The board moved on as if she wasn't even there. She left that meeting with her heart pounding, embarrassed but still hopeful it was just a mistake. But it wasn't. Within weeks, more notices arrived. Improper garbage placement, lawn uneven, even garage door left open too long. The fines stacked higher, and whispers started spreading through the neighborhood. Sarah noticed that every person who had recently moved in, especially single homeowners, seemed to be getting similar treatment. Meanwhile, the same small circle of people on the HOA board, Adams and his friends, seemed untouchable. One evening, while walking her dog, Sarah overheard 2 neighbors talking near the corner house. "Adams is at it again," one of them muttered. "Poor woman doesn't even know what's coming." Sarah stopped for a second, pretending to fix her dog's leash, but her heart dropped. What did they mean by again? A few days later, an older woman knocked on her door. Her name was Linda Brooks, and she introduced herself as a former HOA treasurer. "You're Sarah, right? I used to handle the books here before I resigned." Her tone was calm, but her eyes looked tired. Linda told her that Adams had been abusing his power for years, fabricating violations, scaring homeowners into selling, and then buying their properties cheap through a company registered under his brother's name. "He hides it all through paperwork," Linda said, "but if you look closely, you'll find it." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat on her couch with the yellow envelopes spread across the coffee table, her mind racing. She decided she wasn't going to be the next victim. The next morning, Sarah requested financial records from the HOA office, something every homeowner has the legal right to do. Adams refused. He said the documents were confidential. So Sarah started collecting her own evidence. She recorded every meeting. She photographed every notice. She kept copies of every email, and slowly she built her own file. One night, unable to shake her suspicions, she drove past the HOA office after hours. Inside, through the blinds, she saw Adams standing over a shredder. She quietly pulled out her phone and began recording from her car. The flicker of the lights, the whir of the shredder, the sight of documents disappearing, she caught it all. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve was solid. The next morning, a new envelope arrived, but this one was different. It wasn't a fine, it was a threat. Final warning: continued violation will result in foreclosure proceedings. Sarah's blood ran cold. She hadn't broken a single rule. She called the HOA office. They hung up. Her emails bounced back. The next day, someone spray painted "rule breaker" across her fence. That night, Linda called. "They're trying to break you," she said softly, "but you're stronger than they think." Sarah decided to dig deeper, online this time. She checked the HOA's official website and domain registration. What she found made her heart skip. The website was linked to Adams Realty LLC, the same name that appeared on county records as the buyer of several foreclosed homes in Willow Creek. It was all connected. Linda gave her one final clue: a set of old meeting minutes she'd saved before she resigned. In them, there was an invoice. Maintenance, Lot 42, $7,500. But Willow Creek only had 41 lots. Lot 42 didn't exist. Sarah had found the smoking gun. She spent the next few nights putting everything together: the notices, the photos, the video of Adam's shredding papers, and the fake invoices. Then she did something bold. She sent the entire file anonymously to a local investigative journalist. 3 days later, the story broke. Local HOA president under investigation for fraud and harassment. Her phone started buzzing nonstop. Neighbors whispered. Cars slowed down as they passed her house. And that evening, just as the sun was setting, she saw flashing lights reflecting off every mailbox in the street. 2 police cruisers pulled up to the community center. Sarah stood quietly across the road, watching as the officer stepped out. The emergency HOA meeting was in full swing. Through the window, she could see Adams gesturing wildly, red-faced and shouting. Then one of the officers walked in. "Mr. Adams, we need you to come with us." The room froze. Everyone stared as he was handcuffed and let out the door. Sarah didn't cheer. She didn't even move. She just closed her eyes and took a deep breath, the first peaceful one in months. A few weeks later, the neighborhood began to change. The HOA board resigned. New members were elected. The rules were rewritten, fair and transparent. Neighbors who once avoided Sarah now stopped by to apologize. Even Linda looked lighter, finally free from the weight of secrets. They offered Sarah a position on the new board. She smiled and shook her head. "I just want peace," she said. And that evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, looking at the same fence that started it all. Still the same color, still standing strong. Sometimes justice doesn't roar in. Sometimes it arrives quietly, with the sound of sirens fading down a perfect suburban street. And in Willow Creek Estates, it arrived for Sarah Coleman. Because sometimes the calmest voices echo the loudest truth.